Hey, what's going on, everybody? So, let me see here. So, today is probably going to be hopefully a quicker video. It's about one of the underlings or partners to Frank Terpil in the Blonde Ghost network that I'm working on here. So, it's a little schematic that I did. But, anyways, you can kind of see on the screen while that's loading. But, anyways, Edwin Wilson, Frank Terpil, Greg Korkala. So Greg Korkala was kind of like an underling to this Frank Terpil guy, right? So that's what I was gonna do. All right. So we know that the Blonde Ghost Network, right? I called the Blonde Ghost Network because of Theodore Shackley, whose code name was the Blonde Ghost. But really, the person leading what I call the Blonde Ghost Network was, or at least this project, or at least the project of selling C4 to the Libyans was managed by Edwin Wilson, a ex-CIA person, agent, contractor, later with the Office of Naval Intelligence, who kind of kept ties to the agency through like various array of shell companies that he was really good at setting up, and he helped sell C4 to Libya. But one of his underlings or partners was Frank Terpil, and one of Frank Terpil's underlings or soldiers in his crew was Gregary Korkala. I kind of it kind of works like a little mafia set here. Like you have a boss, you have a little like kind of a liaison person or whatever. You have a capo, all that type of stuff. So this little cabal of rogue CIA operatives kind of operated like a little mafia family or crew. Um, but one of the people whose names shows up is Gregory or Gary Korkala, right? Seems like a smaller character for the most part, but this is him right here.
Korkala, George Gregary, nickname Gary, date of birth February the 9th, 1941, place of birth Detroit, Michigan, height 5'11", weight 175 pounds, hair blonde, race white.
So I'll go more into detail about what he did, but he was busted with Frank Terpil in New York City by undercover police doing like an arms deal or whatnot, and Korkala eventually ended up fleeing the country. But there's another part that Frank Terpil mentions Korkala's name in the documentary Frank Terpil Confessions of a Dangerous Man, and I think I have the timestamp written down. Yep, so let me try this here. Let me play this for you.
The vetting of his own government.
As Terpil told it, he was associated with the most traumatic events of our time. He had helped to train and equip the Grey Wolves, whose membership included Mehmet Agha, the man who shot the Pope. Were there no times when you felt, I know what's going on here, and I don't want any part in it?
I do not get wrapped up emotionally with the country. I regard myself basically as neutral and commercial.
Sometimes Terpil seemed proud of his deals and connections. At other times, he kept his distance. Do you know Carlos Ramirez Sanchez?
No, I do not.
On the bugged tape of the 17th of December, Gary Korkala, in your presence, offers the undercover agents Carlos the Jackal for a job. And was that a lie? Was that just trying to impress them?
Korkala may have said that to impress him.
But not being able to deliver?
Not that I know of.
Do you exaggerate? Race white. Shortly before midnight on December the 22nd, Frank Terpil and Gary Korkala were taken from their cells on the ground floor of the New York criminal courts and arraigned before Judge Haft. Bail was opposed by Assistant District Attorney Matthew Crossan.
I opposed bail because we found during our investigation that Frank Terpil and George Gregary Korkala were major suppliers of weapons and assassination devices to terrorists and terrorist groups all around the world. During the course of our investigation, we obtained irrefutable evidence that they had supplied and attempted to supply to our undercover detectives who were posing as Latin American terrorists a variety of weapons, including 10,000 British machine guns, a silenced sniper rifle, a silenced semi-automatic pistol, poisons, liquid explosives, explosive briefcases, and other devices of a similar nature.
In court, the Honorable James Leff rejected Matthew Crossan's arguments. On the 5th of January 1980, Frank Terpil and George Gregary Korkala were released on bail after each had forfeited $100,000 surety. 4 months later, Frank Terpil was arrested a second time and committed to the federal penitentiary in Washington, D.C. Terpil and a man called Edwin P. Wilson were indicted by the federal authorities in Washington on charges including acting as an agent for a foreign power, to wit, Libya, transportation of explosives in foreign commerce, conspiracy to commit murder. In Washington, a judge once more rejected the prosecutor's appeal and granted bail to Frank Terpil. With serious charges against him in New York and now in Washington, Terpil was free again. On September the 5th, 1980, Frank Terpil and George Gregary Korkala, his co-defendant in New York, slipped out of the country for an undisclosed destination in the Middle East. Korkala was confident enough to travel on his own passport. The New York trial proceeded without them. The prosecution case was based on evidence obtained in a massive undercover operation. Detectives Rodriguez and Rod had originally followed a tip-off from a man who was involved with the suspects in an illegal arms deal. The two Spanish-speaking detectives were simply substituted for South American buyers that Terpil and Korkala were expecting.
On the 15th of November 1979, the case started. Jose was to portray the big boss. We used the name Patron to identify him. I was the person who would actually do the talking for Jose, since he would be playing the character of a person who didn't speak any English at all. And I would not only translate, but since I have some knowledge of weapons, my own background and my police experience, I would also be the weapons expert. After we met Gary Korkala for the first time. He started to explain to us what weapons were available. He inquired whether we were an army or a terrorist group. I made it quite clear that we were a terrorist group. And then we started discussing weapons that would be utilized in a terrorist-type organization.
The first thing that Korkala sold to the undercover detectives was this silenced .22 caliber assassination pistol. The entire silver part of the barrel is a silencer. They were offering this particular weapon to our undercovers as an example of the type and quality of silencer that they could provide in quantities of up to 10,000 lots. The second weapon that Korkala and Terpil sold to the undercover detectives was this .22 caliber silenced sniper rifle, which they specially manufacture. The entire barrel of this weapon is a silencer from just below the sight where I'm pointing to the end. This is fitted with an aim point electronic sight. This allows the person who is firing the weapon to keep both eyes open, watching the target at which he's shooting. This weapon and the Ruger that I just showed you were each sold for $1,500. Also at the second meeting, Mr. Korkala sold to the undercover detectives for $800, this bottle of strychnine poison, he said, has the capacity to kill 25 people. It is so powerful that individuals poisoned by strychnine have been known to die in a convulsion so strong that only the top of their head and their heel is touching the ground at the time of death. The body is arched completely off the ground.
The suspects apparently offered their clients a veritable arsenal of terrorist weaponry. This is Korkala's demonstration model exploding briefcase. Terpil's forte was special purpose weaponry, including a pen that fires a poison dart through a Teflon barrel, which Terpil particularly recommended for assassinations in aeroplanes.
He described the manner in which you would do it, that being that you would walk down the aisle of the plane next to the person you intended to assassinate. And as you came next to him, fire the poison dart right behind his ear, striking either the carotid artery or the jugular vein. And then go back to your seat and sit down.
The second special purpose weapon combines a cigarette lighter and a pen which fires a .22 caliber bullet. The pen acts as a barrel, the bullet and cocking mechanism are in the lighter. But perhaps the most lethal product in Terpil's arsenal was binary liquid explosive.
And these are the bottles given by Terpil to the undercover detective. Each of the parts is relatively stable when separate, but when mixed together forms a liquid that is an explosive 3 to 4 times as powerful as ordinary dynamite. He described one particular occasion in which he drained the radiator of an automobile and filled it with binary explosive.
His eyes would light up as he described how you fill up the whole radiator. And then you just need a detonator and you watch the car go up in the air and little bits were the only thing left over.
He also described blowing up the lobby of a hotel in the Middle East by pouring binary liquid explosive in the earth in a potted plant in the lobby.
He says, "Oh, it's great, Jimmy, it's great." He says, "You take a flower pot. We did this in the Middle East. And you put the one part liquid, and then you wait a week, and you put the second part. And then the third time you come over and you put the detonant." The whole hotel went up in the air. And when he described these things, he very excited about it. And he kept apologizing that he didn't have a camera to film it. He says, I couldn't film it, but it was great to see. I stood on the corner and watched it. At that point, I realized I was dealing with a maniac.
Rodriguez was also dealing with a man who had powerful contacts. The prosecution case rested heavily on 34 hours of bug conversation. Although Terpil was absent from court, the jury heard him describe on tape his links with an astonishing assortment of individuals and organizations, including the CIA, the Turkish Grey Wolves who trained Mehmet Agha, the man who shot the Pope, Colonel Gaddafi, the Libyan head of state, Ilich Ramirez Sanchez, known as Carlos the Jackal, Idi Amin, the former president of Uganda, and Amin's competitor in terror, the self-styled Emperor Bokassa. Clearly, Terpil wanted to impress his clients with his credentials.
He was a man who was willing and able to do just about anything. And he was a man who was trusted by people whom he assumed terrorists would respect. Idi Amin and Muammar Gaddafi, Carlos the Jackal. He has been described to me by people who knew him and saw his actions in Uganda as the man who would occasionally put steel into the spine of Idi Amin when Idi Amin himself was waffling about doing something.
I've dealt with numerous gun runners and gun merchants, and I can honestly say that he's about the biggest one I've dealt with. His connections, his past escapades, his experiences, and in general, his whole background is incredible. I don't think I'll ever meet someone like Frank Terpil again. I think I've reached my peak with Frank Terpil.
The jury was impressed by the prosecution's case, and on May the 15th, 1981, Terpil and Korkala were found guilty in absentia on all 11 charges in the New York indictment. Acting Justice Thomas B. Galligan recommended that neither of the two men should be released from prison 1 minute earlier than 53 years, the maximum that the law allows. In court he said, quote, "These men trade in death and destruction. That is their business. They have no allegiance to any flag. They prosper in a world at war. Wherever terrorism and torture are, they are." Two weeks after his conviction, Frank Terpil sent us a coded telex from the Middle East. He wanted to present, quote, "the defense side of his case via TV and cine media," end quote. We were invited to a penthouse apartment in the Hamra district of Beirut to meet Frank Terpil and his permanent companion, Ruth Boyd. The man who has been described in court as a mastermind of international terrorism and the key contributor to Amin's death machine, told us about his work for the Ugandan dictator.
Okay, so that's all the video about Korkala, right? So there's not too much about the guy. So let me go here real quick. So there's a article that I downloaded, and blow this up. All right, so fugitive arms dealer Gregary Korkala, who fled the United UPI archives March 14th, 1983. New York, fugitive arms dealer Gregary Korkala, who fled the United States at the beginning of his trial on illegal weapons charges, was returned to New York from Spain. It was now announced today. Uh, Manhattan District Attorney Robert M. Morgenthau said that a Spanish constitutional tribunal had granted a United States request for Korkala's extradition, and he was flown to New York from Madrid Saturday. In absentia, Korkala, 42, was convicted in 1981 of conspiracy to sell 10,000 submachine guns along with 10,000 rounds of ammunition, explosives, and other weapons to undercover police posing as Latin revolutionaries. After he fled, forfeiting $100,000 bail, he was subsequently sentenced to 17 years and two thirds to 53 years in jail by Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Thomas Galligan. So sentenced to 17 and two-thirds to 53 years in jail. Wow. Um, a co-defendant, Frank Terpil, 44, formerly of McLean, Virginia, a former CIA agent, also jumped bail, is believed to be living in Beirut, Lebanon. He was also sentenced in absentia to the same jail term. So there's that, and that's really kind of like the only article I was able to find on this guy. But when I go to the CIA reading room and I type in Korkala, see what comes up real quick. So let me exit out of here. Let me pull this up real quick. Okay, so go here, here. So blow this up for you. So this is the CIA.gov reading room. So let's just see what we got here. All right, so this is in 1983 by the Associated Press. Bail set at $500,000 for convicted arms smuggler. Bail has been set at $500,000 for George Gregory Korkala, seized in Madrid last year after being convicted in absentia for selling 10,000 machine guns and other weapons to undercover agents posing as Latin American terrorists. Manhattan State Supreme Justice Thomas Galligan on Thursday rejected Korkala's request that he set bail at $100,000 as he did before. Korkala fled the country before his trial, forfeiting the bond money. He was able to walk away from $100,000 before, Galligan said, and I'm obviously not going to set that bail here. Galligan tried Korkala and co-defendant Frank Terpil in absentia in 1981 after they failed to appear for trial. Korkala, 42, was extradited to New York in March after officials agreed to the Spanish government's condition that the Nutley, New Jersey man be retried on the gun running charge. Interesting. So they said he was born in Michigan, I guess, but then he was also of Nutley, New Jersey. Interesting. Okay, so Terpil, a former CIA agent who is still at large, and Korkala um, were sentenced by Galligan in June 1981 to 17 and 2/3 to 53 years in state prison for selling the guns to two undercover detectives at a New York hotel. They were also found guilty of selling 10 million rounds of ammunition, a bomb, firearm silencers, and 4 other guns. Korkala was apprehended last February at an exhibition of security devices in Madrid. Following more than a year of extradition proceedings, he was returned here in the custody of federal agents and detectives of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. So besides the state charges, Korkala and Terpil have been indicted on federal charges of conspiring to sell arms to the regime of Idi Admin, ousted Ugandan dictator. Korkala's lawyer, Angelo Bianchi, said, what? Angelo Bianchi? Okay, 1 minute. Said Thursday that his client was released from federal custody Wednesday after being repatriated because the U.S. Attorney's Office agreed he had been extradited specifically in connection with the state gun selling case. The state bail hearing came after Korkala's release from federal custody. Galligan, who ordered Korkala held in protective custody, adjourned the state case until September 6th. So that's very interesting there. So 1 minute. So there's that article there. So 1 minute. Okay, so I found another article on the CIA reading room. So this is by Washington. This is in the Washington Post, 11 March 1981, by Maxine Cheshire. So, like the plot of a John Le Carre spy novel, the saga of fugitive arms dealer Frank Terpil and George Gregory Korkala. So George Gregory Korkala. Let's see here, volume's good. Has taken another new twist. The U.S. State Department checking a report that Korkala may have met with foul play in Amsterdam recently. Terpil is a flamboyant former Central Intelligence Agency officer who had been trying, even in absentia, to help his good friend, deposed Ugandan dictator Idi Amin, return to power. At the request of the FBI and other American law enforcement agencies, the State Department has had The Hague checking the deaths of all 30 white males of any nationality in Holland in recent weeks. Friends of Korkala's, concerned about his whereabouts, have reason to believe he was traveling under false passports, one source says, most recently Canadian. The government here has been told that Korkala may have been murdered to prevent him from returning to the United States and giving himself up. There had been reports from his family and others that indicated he may have intended to come home in mid-February and turn government witness against other international weapons merchants. Korkala says one source has failed to check in recently. So Korkala says one source has failed to check in recently with the one person who has always been able to contact him since he fled the country last September to avoid facing trial on charges of training terrorists, selling guns, and exporting high-powered explosives. This has added credence to the rumor of assassination, which first surfaced 2 weeks ago. Korkala and Terpil, who disappeared at the same time, were co-defendants. Terpil is believed to be in Libya as a quote-unquote contract worker for Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. So this is interesting. So this was written in 1981, though, right? So that other article that I read, I want to say was in 1983. So I think he may have like faked his death, or people just thought he was dead, and he was eventually found in Spain at that trade show. So yeah, so there's this article here. So 1 minute. All right, so I found another article. It's got an interesting photo of Wilson. Of Terpil. He kind of looks like a sad Mario. So this is from the Washington Post, 1981. Ex-agent Terpil indicted in arms delivery to admin. So New York. Let me blow it up a little bit more for you. So former CIA agent Frank Terpil and one-time business associate were indicted by federal grand jury here today on charges of conspiring in 1979 to deliver guns, decoding devices, and instruments of torture to Idi Amin, who then was dictator to Uganda. The six-count indictment alleges that Terpil and George Gregary Korkala illegally delivered to the UN mission of the former Ugandan government quantities of semi-automatic shotguns, handguns, silencers, high-velocity, hollow-point magnum ammunition, voice encipherment systems, and torture items known as quote-unquote exercise twisters. The indictment further charges that Terpil and Korkala delivered lead-lined, X-ray-proof packing sheets to the mission staff to facilitate the air shipment of the weapons under diplomatic seal or in commercial Ugandan aircraft to Uganda. The indictment says that Terpil formerly controlled the Oceanic International Corp of Washington, D.C., and that Korkala controlled the operations of Amstech International Ltd. Or Limited in Nutley, New Jersey. Korkala is additionally charged with 3 counts of engaging in the sale of firearms without a federal dealer's license and transporting the weapons in foreign commerce. The two defendants that Terpil's wife, Marilyn, are charged in. So the two defendants and Terpil's wife, Marilyn, are charged in a separate conspiracy to secure false passports and travel documents for Amir Farhang Momtaz, a senior official in the former royal government of the Shah of Iran. The indictment charges that for a $5,000 payment, the defendants altered the photo on a legitimate U.S. passport, provided a false Lebanese passport, and that Marilyn Terpil accompanied Momtaz to the passport agency in New York, where she posed as his daughter and assisted him in submitting a false birth certificate and driver's license in order to secure a valid U.S. passport. The two conspiracy counts and the substantive passport fraud count with which Marilyn Terpil is charged all carry maximum terms of 5 years with fines of up to $10,000. The 3 separate counts in which Korkala is charged carries a 5-year prison term for conviction on each count. On On May 16, 1981, Terpil and Korkala were convicted in absentia in New York for selling arms to two undercover agents posing as terrorists. They were sentenced to 17 to 53 years in prison. All three defendants are fugitives. Interesting. Interesting. So, what was her name? Marilyn. So, Terpil and Korkala are both believed to be in Beirut. Interesting. All right.
He needed some
Told terrorists invited to a penthouse apartment in the Hamra district of Beirut to meet Frank Terpil and his permanent companion, Ruth Boyd. The man who has been described
Very interesting. So, in the documentary, he's with this lady named Ruth Boyd, but according to this article, he had a wife named Marilyn Terpil who was also became a fugitive. So I'm not sure if they just split ways or something, or was this a marriage of convenience, or who knows? But that's a new name I have to add now. So to the list. So let me pause real quick. All right, here's another article I found. What's up? Wow, so fugitive ex-agent's wife gives up on charges involving arms sales. So Marilyn Terpil, the wife of Frank E. Terpil, a fugitive former agent of the Central Intelligence Agency, has surrendered in New York in a case involving illegal arms sales to Uganda. Miss Terpil So Miss Terpil is not accused of selling weapons, but of conspiring with her husband to use false documents to obtain a United States passport for a former Iranian official as part of a conspiracy in the arms deal. She surrendered to the customs agents Tuesday night after flying from New York to New York from London, a federal prosecutor said. Her husband was last seen in Beirut, Lebanon, according to Raymond A. Levite, the prosecutor. Mr. Levite said another defendant in the case, George Gregary Korkala, was being held in Madrid awaiting extradition to New York. Mr. Terpil was associated with Edwin P. Wilson, another former agent of the intelligence agency, who was sentenced last month to 15 years in prison for illegally shipping weapons to Libya. Released on personal bond, Magistrate Kent Sinclair Jr. released Miss Terpil yesterday on a $50,000 personal reconnaissance bond, um, which requires no cash. She is to be arraigned next Tuesday. Guy L. Heineman, Miss Turpil's lawyer, said she would plead not guilty and expects to be exonerated. He said the charges against her had resulted solely from the conduct of her estranged husband. Miss Terpil, 43 years old, has been living in England, according to the prosecutor, who said she surrendered voluntarily. She explained that a customs agent went to England 2 months ago to meet Miss Terpil, who subsequently agreed to return to the United States to face charges. The six-count federal indictment of Miss Terpil, her husband, and Mr. Korkala have been filed in Manhattan in 1981. It named her in two counts involving a scheme to obtain a passport for a senior member of the former Iranian royal government. Iranian also indicted. So let me see. So this article was written in 1983. So fled. She fled to London, but came back. So she was 43. in 1983. All right. So Iranian also indicted. Make sure my volume is good here. Okay. So although the indictment did not name the Iranian, he is believed to be Amir Farhang Momtaz, Iran's former chief of protocol, who came to this country after the Shah was deposed. The indictment's main charges accuse Mr. Terpil and Mr. Korkala of directing a scheme in 1979 to sell more than $10,000 worth of weapons to the members of the Ugandan delegation to the United Nations. Wow. Okay. Um, the indictment asserts the illegal sales included semi-automatic pistols, silencers, ammunition, and torture devices. The indictment charges the defendants with delivering the weapons to the Ugandan mission at 336 East 45th Street and with knowing that the arms would be exported to Uganda. Mr. Terpil and Mr. Korkala were convicted in absentia, so we already know that. So I'm not really sure how this Iranian person fits in. Maybe he was trying to help facilitate this sale to Uganda via the UN mission or something, Ugandan mission. So interesting. Oh, you can almost think about it. They're trying to sell guns and weapons. You could think of it as almost like a consulate type thing. And I'm trying to think that maybe they were trying to get this Iranian to kind of be the courier for them or something. Maybe. I'm not sure. That's kind of interesting there. So we know that. So Mary Terpil. Interesting. All right, 1 minute. Okay, so here's another article. So arms merchant Terpil tells tales of horror by Blaine Hardin of the Washington Post. Frank Terpil, an international merchant of weapons and torture devices who fled his McLean home last September to avoid New York State charges of selling machine guns and federal charges of training terrorists in Libya, has always had a penchant for shooting off his mouth. In three tape-recorded meetings in room number 2737 of the New York Hilton in the late fall of 1979, Terpil's irrepressible gabbing helped get him sentenced last week to 53 years in prison. He was convicted in absentia in a New York State court in May of conspiring to sell 10,000 machine guns to New York City undercover agents for possession of pistols, rifles, explosives. The tapes introduced as evidence in his trial also provided a chilling inside account of Idi Amin's bloody Uganda in the ghoulish immoral world of international arms dealing. Terpil, 41, a former CIA agent, boasted that he attended a state dinner in Kampala with Amin, where the severed head of a Ugandan defense minister was presented on a large serving tray, according to state transcripts. Terpil and his fellow arms merchant George Gregary Korkala also told undercover agents of poisoning an innocent patron at a Beirut restaurant, witnessing gruesome tortures in Uganda, um, and training Libyans to turn automobiles into fragmentation bombs. So both Terpil and Korkala are believed to be in the Middle East pursuing their international arms businesses. Matthew Croson, an assistant Manhattan district attorney in charge of the Terpil case, said yesterday that Terpil is probably living in Damascus, Syria, and Korkala is staying at the Wiener House in Beirut, a well-known meeting place for the Palestinian Liberation or organization. Um, so Edwin P. Wilson, another former CIA employee indicted with Terpil, is believed to be living in Libya, working as an arms producer for Libyan leader Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. Terpil, according to Ugandan government documents, sold $3.2 million worth of weapons, surveillance equipment, and explosives to Amin's government beginning in 1978. Before his dealings with Amin, he allegedly worked with Wilson in providing arms and other military equipment to Libya. Terpil and Wilson also have been linked with an aborted assassination attempt of one of Gaddafi's political opponents in 1976. And I want to say that would be, what's his name? Abdullah Buyashi, I believe. Before he skipped this country, Terpil lived in a $260,000 Japanese contemporary home on Chain Bridge Road in McLean, Virginia. So, let's see here. So, Chain Bridge Road, McLean, Virginia. It's the Terpil house. Let me see here. I'm sorry. Home on Chain Bridge Road in McLean, less than a half mile from Ethel Kennedy's estate. Terpil's home, which features a basement firing range and a bookcase that opens into a network of concealed passageways, has been seized by the IRS in lieu of a $2.8 million in unpaid taxes. Terpil, who was born in Brooklyn, worked for CIA as a communications specialist in the Middle East and Pakistan from 1965 to 1971. According to sources in Washington, he was fired because of superiors could not tolerate his indiscriminate boasting. Interesting. So fired for boasting, 1965 to 71. Pakistan. All right. Wait 1 minute. All right. So Terpil, a stocky, brown-haired man who has spent a good part of his adult life as an arms merchant, scuttling between the United States, Europe, and Africa, first met with undercover agents in the New York Hilton on November 16th, 1979. So, yep, November 16th, 1979, the New York Hilton. All right, Terpil, I want to say, what was it? Okay, sorry, I'm just going to keep reading. So Terpil told two undercover agents who were posing as South American terrorists in need of machine guns and who were known as Rod and Rodriguez, that he was an important member of Amin's Ugandan entourage and that he supplied Amin with weapons and poisons, that he was the only American allowed to witness public executions in Uganda. According to the transcript, Terpil launched into a bizarre account of a state dinner that Amin held for his senior ministers. Terpil said that Amin ate with his hands, as was his custom. Yeah, so he, Amin, said to the assembled ministers, "I know which one of you people are working for the Kenyans," he said. "The Minister of Defense told me. Now nobody knows the minister. Now nobody knows the minister is gone. See, he just doesn't show up for the dinner, and Amin says we have him up at State Research Bureau, which, man, that was a one-way gate." That's where my offices were, up there, Terpil says in the transcript. Jeez. After Amin was deposed in the spring of 1979, um, show that Terpil helped train members of the dreaded State Research Bureau, which engaged in murder. So wow, let me see that. So after, so it's saying after Amin was deposed, show that Terpil helped train members of the dreaded State Research Bureau. Wow. So the Terpil transcript continues. Admin said, "One of you people at the table is working for Kenya. If you tell me, we'll let bygones be bygones. And if a guy believes that he's got to be a freak, nobody tells him. So they bring on the food. Fried bananas, terrible. And then they bring on the meat. So they put this big effing tray in the middle of the table, and Edie's guy, the waiter, lifts off the lid, and there's a effing head of the Minister of Defense. Terpil, according to the transcript, told agents that one minister at the table gasped. Admin, sensing he had found the traitor, fired a bullet into the gasping man's face, Terpil said. Terpil said that the bullet was fired from a .357 Magnum pistol, which he had given Admin. Engraved on the weapon was that Terpil described as Amin's favorite expression: "I want this man killed completely." Uh, So in the Hilton meetings, Terpil's colleague Korkala, who ran an arms manufacturing firm in Nutley, New Jersey, which is that AMS Tech or whatever. Let me see here. Before he fled the country last fall, presented a laundry list of arms available to the supposed South American terrorists. They included American M16, Soviet AK-47, French submachine guns, ground-to-air, hand-launched rockets, laser sights, and explosives. Korkala also tried to interest the undercover agents in poisons, according to the transcript. He said he helped test in a Beirut restaurant and the effectiveness of 5 kilos of cyanide he sold to a group of Middle Eastern terrorists. Korkala, when they tested the poison, they put a spoonful in the guy's soup. We didn't know who the guy was. We knew they were going to do something. Laughter on the transcript. A effing spoonful in his mouth, and when he took a drink, one spoonful, and his head fell in the bowl of soup. He was gone like that. The transcript indicates that Korkala snapped his fingers. Wow. Whoa. So, geez. Okay. So there's that. So there's that. Wow. So Idi Amin showing heads, them selling poisons, and wild stuff here. All right. So here's another article. This is by the Daily Telegraph, and it's a British paper. Oops. All right. So only in the United States and Canada by Tim Brown. So Madrid. So the United States will ask for the extradition of convicted gun runner Joseph Gregary Korkala, following his arrest at a security equipment exhibition in Madrid. A U.S. embassy official in the Spanish capital said Friday that the Spanish authorities have been advised that a formal request for the 41-year-old arms dealer to be extradited would be made under Spanish law. The United States has 45 days to present its case, which will be referred to the cabinet. Korkala was arrested at the Crystal Palace Exhibition Hall on the outskirts of Madrid, where an international exhibition of security equipment is being held. Police will give no detail Friday of the arrest except to say that Korkala offered no resistance and had committed no offense in staying. He was detained because a warrant was out for his arrest through Interpol. It was understood that Spanish police arrested Korkala after the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in New York received information that he was in Madrid. A fugitive warrant for Korkala's arrest was issued in New York in November following his conviction and sentencing in his absence to a minimum of 17 years and 17 years and 8 months in jail for illegal arms dealing. He was convicted with former CIA agent Frank Terpil of attempting to sell 10,000 machine guns to supposed Latin American revolutionaries. The alleged South Americans were undercover police agents. Terpil and fellow ex-CIA man Edwin Wilson are alleged to have drawn on their experiences and contacts gained while working for the U.S. intelligence agency to supply military equipment and know-how to Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, the Libyan leader. The equipment, said U.S. intelligence sources, was then passed to terrorist organizations including the IRA, the Italian Red Brigades, and the Baader Meinhof gang in Germany. Um, in New York, Korkala had been indicted on one count of violating the Neutrality Act by supplying arms to Uganda, other accounts of illegal arms trafficking, and one count of conspiring to illegally obtain passports for aliens. Jeez, which must be that Iranian guy. So there's that there. So Korkala was 41. Was 41 in 1982. But then when we go to this documentary, making sure his name is right. So it's like
Race white. And Korkala, George Gregary. Nickname Gary. Date of birth February the 9th.
so it seems like so I think his name may have been one of those longer old fashioned names of Joseph George Gregory Korkala, but he went by Gary. So Joseph George Gregory, therefore Gary Korkala is kind of his name. He was 41 in 1982. So wow, helping ship stuff to Uganda. It looked like the selling the guns to the undercover revolutionaries. Yep, Uganda. Trying to get the passports. So just a lot of craziness with this dude for the most part. So let me see here. There's that. Jeez. Okay. Just kind of looking at my notes here real quick. Jeez. So we got IRA, okay. All right. Well, I think that's kind of all we have about Gregary Korkala, man. So he's wow, found more on him than what I expected. To be honest, actually, let me do something here. Okay, so earlier you probably heard me say, "Whoa," when I saw the name Angelo Bianchi, who was the lawyer of Korkala in one of the earlier articles I wrote. The reason why I thought that was strange is because it's kind of a weird splice between Angelo Bruno Jr., who was one of the Hillside Stranglers, and his cousin Kenneth Bianchi. So you just basically take Angelo Bruno's first name and Kenneth Bianchi's last name, you get this lawyer's name. So I thought that was just really, really just strange. So I was like, wait, was what? I was like, okay, but that's obviously not the right person. So, um, but anyways, so let me pause real quick again. Okay, so interesting. I just typed in his name in Nutley, New Jersey, and a Gary Korkala shows up, who's interesting. Security Defense Systems Corporation. So he may be working there. So looking for a contact at cartridge actuated devices and X-ray that needs to be level 3 technician. So he looks like he's kind of he's kind of skilled at X-ray imaging or whatnot, which seemed to have been of use to Frank Terpil, if this is the same person, because we know that they were using kind of like special lead coated packages and diplomatic packages to like smuggle contraband. So it's like he understands X-ray imaging. And the one thing I notice about a lot of these CIA guys is that a lot of them have some sort of electronics, radio, communications, a lot of them, some sort of background training, etc., which is very interesting. Um, in Vice President of Security Defense Systems Corporation from 1980 till now, and then also the owner of Codex. So Codex Inc. from 1980 to now, and both. Wow. So Codex manufactures and distributes high-resolution digital X-ray imaging systems for industrial non-destructive testing, quality control applications for low energy, 20 volts, yada yada energy. So here we go. Wow. So he's still in the whole X-ray thing. So he's like some X-ray expert. If this is him, I mean, it seems kind of a coincidence because when I go over to here, I see, I think he might have a wife. Either Donna L. Korkala, who's around 81 years of age, which makes sense. So, like, 81 years of age, you know, so you see it's like 2024 right now. Let me see here. So 1943 she would have been born or whatnot. So makes sense, really. So in like, I think so in like 1982. So she would have been like 39 years old, and he would have been like 41. So he's about 2 years older than she, if that's the case, or whatnot. But also might be because this codex shows up. Also to Pamela Korkala of Nutley, whose name is kind of listed here. So what is this? Wow. So yeah, Codex. So when I go to the Codex site, when I click on hover over the hyperlink, it sends me to securitydefense.com. So I'm gonna say, so what is that? Security Defense Systems. / Codex. So let me do something here. Wow. They do like X-rays and stuff like that. And if you go to, wow, okay. You go to contact. Yeah. So Codex X-ray. Wow. They were listed as subcontractors to construction. So they do X-ray for a lot of different stuff. So one of the principal owners is Pamela. So maybe I would say there's probably a daughter potentially, or something like that. Wow, this is wild. So 1 minute, we pause here. Okay, so I think I'm just gonna wrap it up there. It was just kind of crazy. Like, wow. So I think this might be our guy. 1980 Codex type thing too. Like, kind of found some of his business. X-ray machines. Codex is just another. Codex is just the doing business name of Security Defense Systems, which is located in Nutley, New Jersey. So not too far from New York City. So pretty interesting. So kind of similar to what happened to Harry Rastatter and Bill Wiesenberger. A lot of these guys went to go work for these kind of niche, kind of small business subcontractor type people in their kind of niche field of like surveillance, electronics, things of that nature. So, I'm going to end it right there. All right, thank you. All right, bye.